Sal, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on here today. Excited that you are one of the first guests on Conversations with Cabral. Ever since I did your show about 2 years ago now on Mind Pump, and we'll talk more about your podcast, of course, coming up in the show, I've had such a great connection with a lot of your community. And right away, when I was on with you, Adam and Justin, I believe, and Doug as well, that we just had a great conversation. I think it was like an hour and a half, 2 hours long, and it flew by. I could have easily chatted with you for another hour or two, but we get to continue that conversation right now on my home court. So welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on. We had a lot of fun with you. You made a huge impact with our audience. And I always love meeting people from different facets of the health and wellness space who've been doing it for a long time, because although we all entered in through different doors, I think we all start to find the same kind of philosophy and truth when it comes to helping people through the means of, whether it's fitness or nutrition or, other means to improve health. And so you brought incredible knowledge to the podcast, but we definitely were speaking a similar language. So we appreciated it.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Now, I always love to ask people, since a lot of people I do have on, they do so many things and they do a lot of things really well. So when someone asks you, what do you do, especially like right now in 2020 going into 2021, how do you respond to that?
These days we use the mediums of new media, podcasts, YouTube, written content, really to promote health and fitness the right way. And when I say the right way, what I mean is differently than it's been promoted, I'd say, for the last maybe 20 years. My background and my co-host background are as personal trainers. The vast majority of the time we spent in this space was training clients and managing gyms and working with people face to face. And when you do that for a long enough period of time, especially if you're very passionate about helping people, you start to figure a few things out. You start to figure out that the approach to helping people get to their goals and help them stay there long term is very different than the way that you might have been taught early on, or the way that the marketing communicates fitness and health. And then you realize that you're in for an uphill battle. So our goal now really is to combat the popular fitness media, the information that we're constantly fed from the fitness space, both because they have their vested interest in selling their products, but also because the consumer tends to like to be told, convenient lies, I would say. And so there's this bit of this monster in the fitness space. And so here we are trying to beat that message with what we believe to be the truth, which is harder to sell. It's just harder to sell the truth. I'll give you an example, Dr. Cabral. Here's a good example, right? The fitness space would say something like, take this supplement stack, follow this meal plan, and follow this crazy workout, and lose 30 pounds in 30 days. Okay. Now I'm here trying to tell people, hey, you want to lose 30 pounds? It'll probably take about a year, maybe longer. We're going to have to make some fundamental changes to the way you view food, your relationship to exercise. Your workouts are going to start really, really slow. We need to build good habits. That's going to be a long, slow process. It's far more difficult than you probably realize. So that message versus this is going to happen in 30 days, take my pills and beat yourself up. How in the heck are we going to outsell that message? And one of the skills that, I developed as a trainer was really how to sell the right message in a way that can beat the wrong message, because that's the key here. I can't beat what they're doing by just simply telling you what I just said. I'm going to turn off 99% of everybody who's interested in just losing weight to look better. So how do I beat that? And so our podcast and our media is an attempt at that, is our attempt at entertaining you and selling you the right way to do things in a way that's more effective than the wrong way. So we're trying to beat the other guy, and we're trying to play their game, but do it in a better way to take people in the right direction. And it's challenging, but it's been a lot of fun. And up until now, I think we've been striking a chord. We've been gaining in popularity. So it shows us that what worked with our clients seems to be working with a large audience.
You know, I think that there's a big difference between people that are kind of just getting into the industry. There's nothing wrong with being 22 and a personal trainer. I was 22 and a personal trainer. You were 22 and a personal trainer. I was 18 and a personal trainer. What I was doing then is very different than what I was doing at 22 versus even 26 or 28. But eventually you do find that there are actually universal truths. And you just kind of spoke about them right there. Meaning there are ways, and both of us, I'm sure, can help people lose 30 pounds in 30 days. But the problem is that that's going to lead to then other issues that we have to then later correct. Whereas if we were to do it right, and we would do it right once, then you're talking about permanent results. So, I mean, they're permanent as long as obviously you change lifestyle and behavior along with those specific actions. But I think, you know, you've probably been doing this close to 20 years or so. I've been doing this 20 years. You start to say to yourself, it's not worth it. It's not ethical. It's not the right thing to do to sell somebody on something that, yes, works in the short term, but causes all these other issues, like we're seeing right now with diet fads that we can get into or not get into, that, yeah, they'll work really fast. But the problem is, here's what it does to your gut microbiome. Here's what it does to your immune system. Here's what it does to your, longevity. So I think it's important that people understand that what you're talking about are true universal truths. People are like, well, there's no one best diet. Well, there kind of is. Now, there's variations of that one best diet for sure. A little bit more starchy carbs, a little bit less. But if you don't include carbohydrates in your diet, well, you're not on track to an actual healthy diet. So I think, and same goes for exercise, like you just said, you don't need to start at high intensity interval training. Now, you offer high intensity interval training, but if you're going from 3,000 or 3,500 steps a day, do you need to do 30-second, 60-second sprints or, cold plunges? I'm not sure that people are always ready there yet. So I want to get into that on today's show. But first, I want to know, how did you even get into the space in the first place? Because when you get to a point that you're at right now, typically you go through your own health journey. So I'd love to hear how you got into the space.
Yeah, so, I initially got into fitness as a kid. I was a 14-year-old kid, very insecure about my physique. I was a skinny kid, wanted to build muscle. And so I idolized, people like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone, and I wanted to build muscle. And my dad had just a kind of a basic home gym in the backyard. They wouldn't let me use it until I turned about 14. As soon as I turned 14, I was out there. And I tend to be a bit obsessive of things that I'm really into. And I got really into training the human body, understanding how the body built muscle and strength. I would buy chemistry books to learn about supplements and buy anatomy books, and just became utterly obsessed at the age of 18. Became a personal trainer, and it was the first time in my life I felt like I was doing something that I was made to do. I have a deep passion for fitness, but I have an even bigger love for people, and that's what personal training is. It's combining those two things. Absolutely loved it. In a very short period of time, 4 months, I was managing trainers, and by the time I was 19, I was managing big box gyms with trainers working for me and salespeople and the whole thing. And I absolutely loved it. And I did that for a little while until I opened up my own wellness facility at the age of 22. The goal with the wellness facility was to be a little bit more well-rounded. At this point, although still very far away from really fully understanding what health meant, I had at least enough awareness to know that I was a fitness meathead guy. So I knew exercise, I knew macros. So I said, okay, I need other people in here. So I had an acupuncturist in there. I had a hormone specialist in there. I had a physical therapist that was in there. I had some bodywork specialists in there, and I had other trainers working in there. And the goal was to really create this kind of whole health environment. Now, the side effect of that was I learned a lot. I was surrounded by people who had just as deep a passion as I did for helping people, but their understanding of health was from a completely different side of the sphere. And we worked in a small facility, and it was very educational to sit and listen to how they talked to their clients, how they approached the problems that their clients presented them. And I was at least open-minded enough to consider that maybe they knew something that I didn't. And so little by little, I learned quite a bit from them. During that period of time, I encountered my own small health crisis. My Gut health took a completely terrible turn. At one point, I thought I had an autoimmune issue. Lost all kinds of muscle and strength, which was a blessing in disguise. Really hit me in my weakness, if you will, my ego. And it was hard for me to identify as the buffed, meathead personal trainer. And in order to solve the problem, none of the things that I understood about health and fitness were working. I thought I was eating right. I had my macros were good. My protein intake was good, carbs and fats. And, this is what's supposed to be healthy. Wasn't working. So I went to the people that worked in my facility and I said, I can't figure this out. I need help. Learned about food intolerances, learned about stress management, learned about other supplements that help with inflammation, and looked at my workouts completely differently, and gave myself a year. Really didn't know it was a year, but said to myself, I'm not going to prioritize my aesthetics anymore. This isn't working. I need to prioritize my health. The wonderful consequence of that was at the end of that year of just focusing on my health, not weighing myself, not really paying attention to the reflection in the mirror. At the end of the year, I saw the results, the physical results of improving my health, and I realized that I looked better than I'd ever looked. And that's when I really understood that, health leads to what most of us want when we start working out, which is aesthetics. Aesthetics almost always doesn't lead to health if that's all you're after. In fact, it tends to cause bad side effects with health, which then result in bad aesthetics. And it completely changed my paradigm and how I approached working with people and training people. And it really molded and formed the voice that I now have on the Mind Pump podcast. And so that's a lot of what I try to communicate. I think a big part of the way we communicate fitness is really looking at things from a psychological, mental aspect. There are definitely ways of training that are on paper, maybe physiologically more effective than others. But if it doesn't work for the person, if the person's not there in that right state of mind, if their core motivation is not right, then it's wrong. It just doesn't work for them. And you have to figure that out if you're looking for real long-term success. I also came to a lot of realizations about the best forms of exercise. I can confidently say my strongest expertise is in the exercise portion of health. And it became very clear that in the context of modern life, where we are very busy, but very sedentary, life is designed that way. So we got stuff going on all the time, but we don't move. We have a infinite amount of choices when it comes to food around us. Most of it designed to be hyper palatable. In fact, most of us value food for its palatability and really are ignorant to the other values that food provides. I started to really realize that the ultimate form of exercise in that context would be a form of exercise that could, in the context of modern life, positively affect your metabolism, to try to create a bit of a buffer that allows you to survive the challenges of modern life of inactivity, lots of food surrounding us. In that context, a faster metabolism makes sense. You don't have a lot of time to be active every single day. What's the best form of exercise that kind of does that? Resistance training. Resistance training on its own does that better than other forms of exercise. Not to say there isn't value in the other forms of exercise. I think there's value in all of them. But I think the way that we've communicated fitness to the masses, to the average person who realistically, Dr. Cabral, the average person is going to, can realistically commit to a couple days a week of exercise, especially in the initial stages until they develop a relationship with exercise where it becomes a regular part of their life. So you're looking at a couple days a week, maybe. Most of the day they're sitting down, they're not moving, they got all this food around them. We need to do something that can buffer that, can cause, give you a little bit of an insurance against that, which is more muscle, more strength, faster metabolism. That's resistance training. That has not been communicated. Resistance training for most of the time, the fitness industry has been popular has been kind of the meathead. They've kind of relegated to that side of the space. Oh, I don't want to look bulky. I don't want to be a bodybuilder. I just want to be fit and healthy. Fit and healthy means running. It means lots of cardio, going for walks. And yes, that does definitely improve health. But really, for the average person, considering the context of things, you probably should be doing some form of resistance training. Start there, get your metabolism a little revved up so that we can buffer what's going on, and then we'll move from there. And so we communicate a lot of that as well on the show. But those are the things that I learned through my 20 plus years of working with people and through this space, just kind of figuring out what really works long term.
So when did you open? What year your original wellness center?
Well, let's see, 20 years ago, 19 years ago. So was that 2001, okay. 2002?
Around 2000. Just because that was not a common thing back then. Meaning once we hit like later 2000s or so, integrative health practice became more popular. So to be able to bring an acupuncturist in and, whether it be PT, chiropractors, whatever, that's interesting. And especially as a 22-year-old. So that shows some real, I think, foresight into, well, maybe you thought it was best for the client. Of course, I think a lot of people in the personal training industry are compassionate. So they are thinking about, hey, what's best for the client, not just for me, is a really important thing. I think that some of the reason why I felt like I was able to move through, just like you did quickly through the industry, meaning like in terms of ascension and knowledge, is that I was the youngest person at my job when I was 22. There was two of us guys who were 22 years old. I didn't own my own facility. I didn't own my own facility until I was 26, 27. But I was surrounded by, there was 36 of us, and that didn't include the managers. 36 other personal trainers, some of them in their 40s and 50s. And first of all, I'd never met a personal trainer in their 40s and 50s. And I'm like, you can even do this when you're 40 and 50. Yeah. And they had accumulated 20, 30 years of knowledge. And so all I did, I asked a lot of questions, but I just watched. I watched how they communicated with their clients. I watched what they did. I watched their preparation. And I was just like a sponge. And it taught me so much. And you could never learn that in school. Like, that's just not a possibility. So I studied my books, but I also then studied people and like great people at it. And then, for me, it was like, okay, well, I was still working in my own health like you. And I simply said, I love this part of it. And I always want this to be a part of what I do. But this is calling to me more, kind of like what you're doing right now. It's like that more of a deeper practice. And so I want to get into, and I want you to add to that, but I want to get into, what did your programs look like in 2000? And what do they look like today?
So right around that time let's take a step back. You're 100% right. In those days, when that was my goal, nobody was doing that. You got to think back now to early 2000s, right? 2000, 2001, 2002. Most grocery stores did not have an organic section, for example. If you wanted organic food, you went to Whole Foods. It wasn't a part of the market. The fitness and health space looked like this. You had your hardcore bodybuilding, fat-burning supplements. Most of them tried to look like anabolic steroids or some crazy drug. That's how they advertised. Then you had the crunchy, wellness, hippie side of supplements that were all about wellness and health and kind of had this spiritual look to their products. And you had this big divide, right? So you're over here or you're over here. If you went to a fitness convention, if you went to a bodybuilding fitness convention, it was like a different gang. You go to the, a paleo convention. They didn't even exist back then, but let's say you went to a wellness convention and everybody looked and talked very differently. It was like they're all trying to be healthy, but they did not look anything like each other. Because I had been training clients at this point for, I started at 18, so 6-7 years. I started to learn a few things. One of the things I loved about personal training was if you really enjoy people, you learn from your clients. And I trained this one woman who, every time we talked about a subject, she was just so well-versed and she could argue both sides so well. I was always so impressed by her. And one day I asked her, I said, every time we talk about a subject, it can be anything, politics, economics, science, health, whatever, you're so well-versed on all sides of it. How do you do that? Like, what do you do, just read all day long? And she said, no, what I do is if I form a strong opinion about something, I seek out somebody who has a differing opinion than mine, who I consider to be intelligent, who I think is open to discussion and debate. And then I engage in a debate type conversation. And I go into it open-minded, hoping they can change my mind or influence me. And I leave either strengthening my argument or with my mind changed, in which case I'm better off. And I thought that was absolutely brilliant. At this time, Facebook was a thing. And I thought, wow, let's create some shortcuts. And so I would go online and I'd find groups for different subject I was interested in. And I would find people who had opposing opinions and I would engage in discussion with them. And it was just, I got my mind changed quite a bit and I learned a lot. And so I kind of created this open-minded, kind of state of being where I know what my opinion is, I know what it is, I know what I believe, but I still want to hear what you have to say. I want to see if my opinion stands the test of discussion. And hey, if I learn a few things, that's great. And I did that with health and fitness. I very strongly felt about my opinions about health and fitness. I believed in lifting weights and doing it hard. I believed in intense exercise. I believed in calories in versus calories out. That was everything, right? I was that typical, stereotypical person. But I also was open-minded and said, okay, well, you've got people who really want to help people, who come from a totally different perspective. They could bring some value. Let's see what happens. Let's bring them in. As long as I like them, I believe them to have a lot of integrity. We'll work with our clients and let's see what develops. And look, at the very least, from a business perspective, a client's going to come in and find somebody that they resonate with. So from a business perspective, I thought this was smart. But yeah, the side effect was I learned a hell of a lot about a lot of things. I remember one conversation in particular with my acupuncturist that rented space. Acupuncturists have a view of how their, how acupuncture works from a kind of a Chinese medicine, Chinese energy perspective, right? Everything's about the flow of energy. You have this energy called qi that runs through your body. It can get blocked, and placing needles in certain parts of the body opens up those channels and balances out this energy. From a Western science point of view, which is kind of where I was coming from more or less, sounds ridiculous. Like, what do you mean this mystical energy? Doesn't make any sense. But again, I was trying to be very open-minded. And I remember reading about, cases of referred pain, right? You go to here's a simple example of referred pain. Your left arm hurts because you have a heart attack, for example. There are parts of your body that you'll feel something, and we know in Western medicine could mean that's heart trouble, that could be your liver, that could be your kidneys, that could be your nervous system or whatever. And I knew that, okay, well, you are putting needles in my body, you are stimulating my central nervous system. Maybe from a Western medicine perspective, the way I would explain it, you're working with the central nervous system and getting it to communicate a little bit better. I knew that, there definitely are cases where people felt pain, took an antidepressant, and the pain went away, for example. Well, so I thought, okay, she's explaining it from this Chinese energy perspective, but really I could see how this could make sense so I just opened my mind and became open to these possibilities. And it taught me a whole lot, made me a much more effective personal trainer. And it made me a maven. When clients would come to me with, I used to be, before this point, I was a hammer, for example. I was one particular tool. Everything looked like a nail. But I started to understand that I'm a hammer and there's a lot of other tools in the tool belt. And when they would come to me with a question or a challenge, I would say things like, you know what? I don't know the answer to that, but I do know somebody that I think might be able to help. And my value just went through the roof for my clients. It became so much more successful, both in helping my clients, but also business-wise. And that was a great period. That whole period really molded kind of who I am now on the podcast.
That's great to hear. And it's also, I would say, as amazing that it happened at that young of an age. And the reason is because most people don't learn that, if ever, until later in life, 30s, 40s, just trying to keep that open mind. Because it comes with self-assurance, meaning like most people don't keep an open mind or not open to the other side unless they feel pretty confident in themselves. So, I know I've followed you on Instagram. I've seen some of your posts as that, skinny 14-year-old kid, which is great. I look basically the same exact way. I was like, not able to put on any size, any weight until really like 18 years old. And that was only because I was eating 6,000 calories a day, 275, 300 grams of protein, everything was counted out. But I didn't have that perspective. And I think that it does take that one person, I talk about it all the time, kind of as my mentor, who you find is like non-intimidating. And they just say, listen, Sal or Steve, that your approach is not wrong. However, there's another level to that. And that's where I began to realize the level and significance of stress and of, too much of what we call the yang in Chinese medicine, or too much of that drive is just like, hey, that's also burning you out. You need to also reel that back in, because your central nervous system affects every other part of your body. When you're talking about with acupuncture, that's exactly right. It's like, well, is this mysterious energy flowing through our body? I don't know, but they've actually just discovered within the last 5 years that there's another level to the dermal layer of the skin, just a couple millimeters below, that actually is like the fascia. It's a fabric that runs through the entire body. So I just think with medical science, although I come from that science perspective as well, we just don't know. And so keeping your mind open is what I always say. Is like when the carnivore diet came around and this came around, I said, all right, let me listen to why people are recommending this. And I got it. Like there's medical doctors and, oh, look at my abs and look at this. I get it. And then, okay, this person's joint pain went away. Understand.
Yes.
But there's then that next level. And I understand. So you're getting the results, but then it's the why.
Yes.
So it's why are you getting those results? And could there be another reason and another level get to? And is this sustainable 10, 20 years from now?
Yeah.
That's where I think you got to.
Well, I want to add one thing, because you did ask about what the programs look like then versus what they may look like now in terms of how I train people. I'll give you a simple example. Early on, if somebody told me, if I said to them, hey, do you do any exercise? And they said, oh, I like to walk, I would have scoffed at that. Oh gosh, walking, you're not burning any calories. That's ridiculous. It's not, you need to get on cardio, sweat it out. You got to do this high intensity interval training. Well, later on, I realized that walking is one of the best forms of exercise, mainly because number one, it's one of the few things that we could do physically that we don't do wrong. So what I mean by that is most adults have kind of lost the ability to run properly and effectively. Although humans evolved to run, you take the average, 20-something-year-old and you tell them to go run, and their mechanics and everything are so bad that it's actually very detrimental to them. But they can walk. Most people can walk. We still walk around. Who knows what that's going to look like in 15 years, but to this day, we still walk. So it is a great form of exercise. But here's the other reason why walking is such a great form of exercise. It's easily injected into our daily lives. And from a psychological, mental point of view, one of the best ways you can apply exercise is in a way that makes it easy to inject into your daily life, and attaching it to your already consistent daily rituals. Okay, so getting someone who doesn't work out to schedule 3 days a week of scheduled exercise, long term, the failure rate on that is very high. If I tell somebody, hey, after breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which is something that everybody does anyway, take a 15-minute walk, the failure rate is very low. It's attached to a current ritual. Walking is easy. I can go outside and do it. I don't have to change into workout clothes. I don't have to get on a piece of cardio. And it doesn't feel like I'm scheduling a workout. It feels like I'm adding to something that I do every day, which is having dinner. Very, very high success rate. So that's one of the main changes, I would say, in how I approach exercise. As we look at it from that point of view, where you're at now, how to get you to where you want to be, what does that journey look like? And here's the second part. Everything used to be about getting to the goal. What is your goal? Let's get you there. What you start to realize if you do this long enough is that the goal that's okay to have goals. There's nothing wrong with that. But becoming married to the goal or making it everything about the goal is almost 100% you're going to eventually fail. Okay, because once you get to your goal, now what? And everything I did was to get to this point. Now I'm at this point. Now what do I do? The other approach or the best approach really is to understand how to fall in love with the process. Okay, the man who loves walking is going to walk further than the man who loves getting to his destination. Okay, if you love walking, you're always going to walk, right? If you just love, I got to get to this point. Once you get to that point, you tend to stop. If we can create those habits and that mentality around exercise and lifestyle to where it's about the journey, you enjoy the journey, it's a discipline. If you're feeling bad, it makes you feel better. If you feel good, you enjoy doing it. If you're sad, it's a wonderful way to make yourself feel better. If you're stressed, if it becomes something that you enjoy doing as a daily part of your journey, the odds that you're going to be consistent long-term are much higher than if you just focus on the goal. And this was a very pivotal moment in my fitness career, understanding this. Once I was able to communicate that to clients, their long-term success rate went through the roof. I have clients that I haven't talked to in 10 years who never worked out before they met me, who still do it. They still exercise. It's a part of their life. Nothing has stopped. And it was because I approached it from that perspective.
I'd like to ask you a question on that, because I feel like we're two, 90-year-old, men at the top of a mountain having this philosophy-based discussion. And I got here, and I feel like we're still at an early age in our lives, but I think this type of thinking, like it isn't about the goal, right? Yes, you want to achieve something, but once you achieve that, you know that there's going to be a next goal, and there's going to be this, and there's going to be that. So I know how I got here. I got here by me being told I wasn't going to live for very long, right? So I had to then, all of a sudden, at 17 years old, I started to have to make connections and be like, okay, everything I've been told is wrong. Like, this is conventional medicine is not the answer here. What is the answer? How does this work? Who's thinking about this? And how did that come about? And I traveled all around the world, and I spoke with different physicians and doctors and Vedas and all sorts of different people. And I arrived at the understanding that there is more to this, and that there are levels to this, and there are ways to think about life in a little different way. And you have that same base philosophy. I know that you said that you went through your health-based issues, but did someone teach you? Did you have a mentor? Was there more to it that got you to understand that? Because right now you could easily be selling, lose 30 pounds in 7 days. Like, right. What was there more to this? I'm just because it's interesting. I love speaking to people and understanding their journey, because, I think you have a philosophy that one wouldn't learn until they were 70, 80 years old, towards the end of their life.
Yeah, no, my love and respect for people, and especially in particular my clients. And here's the thing. One thing that you'll find about good coaches and good trainers is that if they really enjoy training people and really want to help people, that they'll often learn through that process, because you tend to ask yourself at intervals of that process, am I really helping these people? Am I really helping them long term? Is this really bringing them value? And so that's really what did it. It was me constant. And I was a much better trainer to my clients than I was for myself for a long time. I know a lot of trainers are guilty of this. It's like, you need to do it this way. This is better for you. Focus on mobility, help your joints, and then you end up beating yourself up in the gym because for whatever reason you don't apply it to yourself. But it was really about them. Many points in my career, I would pause and say, am I really helping people? I'll give you one example. There was one example that stands out. I had this couple that I trained, and I would train them separately, right? Husband and wife. And this was early on. I'd say I'd only been a trainer for a few years at this point. And her goal was to lose weight, typical goal. And she would come to me and train with me, and I would give her meal plans, and I would tell her how many calories, and track your food, and this is what you got to do, and da-da-da. And then I would, every couple weeks, I'd weigh her and take her measurements and test her body fat. And over the course of a few months, I would notice that, it was quite clear that she wasn't losing any weight. And so I would ask her, and I'd say, is this accurate, what you're reporting to me in terms of your caloric intake and your nutrition? And she'd say, yes, that's totally accurate. And I was I was thinking to myself, there's no way she's lying. She's totally lying to me. She's not serious about this. This is impossible. When I was training her husband confided in me that, yeah, she's eating things that she's not putting on her tracking. That's probably what's going on. So I decided I'd have one of those, hardcore conversations with my client. I'm going to set her straight. I mean, looking back, it was such a terrible way of approaching things, but I thought I was going to do the right thing. I'm going to sit her down and we're going to have one of those, come to talks or whatever. So I sat her down and I said, look, I need you to tell me the truth. What's going on? Of course, she denied it. And I said, look, here's the thing. If you are gaining weight on 1,200 calories, knowing what I know about your workouts, then we need to take you to Stanford University and study you, because you're the first human on earth that's ever gained weight on a lower calorie diet. It's impossible. Your body can't create tissue out of thin air. I did this whole thing, hammered her, basically said to her, either take this seriously or don't take this seriously. The whole thing, right? Thought I was motivating her. Well, anyway, she left, never came back. And I felt very righteous and justified. You know what? She's only hurting herself. I'm not wasting my time with people who aren't serious. And I felt that way for about a week, very justified. Oh, she's not coming back. That's her loss, right? I'll put a client in her schedule that really is serious. Well, about a week goes by, my emotions come down, and I was sitting there thinking about it, and it really started to dawn on me. Wow, I really screwed up. Maybe she wasn't eating in a way that was in line with what she said her goals are. Maybe she wasn't doing everything she could to improve her health, but she was showing up twice a week. 2 days a week she was coming here and I was training her. And I just blew her out. And she probably is not going to come back to any gym, either for a long time or ever. And whatever she was struggling with nutrition is probably worse. I made her feel terrible about herself. She probably felt ashamed. And not only did I not help her, but I made things worse off. That was a very, very powerful moment for me. I wish I could find her, by the way. I looked for her to try and apologize. Years later, I could never find her. I hope she listens to my podcast, because I'd like to say. But totally changed my approach, because I thought to this woman is showing up twice a week, way better than what she was doing before. And I'm a terrible guide. What a terrible guide and coach I am to have done that to her. And so I really started to understand I need to meet people where they are. Most people are not fanatics about fitness. By the way, that's probably a good thing. And I'll say this little side note here, Stephen. I've witnessed more poor relationships with food and exercise in the fitness space than I have in the regular population. So a lot of people don't realize that. They see ripped bodies and, fit-looking people and sexy pictures on Instagram. 80 to 90% of those people are unhealthy. They have an unhealthy relationship with exercise and nutrition. Don't look up to those people. So I know that fanaticism in fitness is just as unhealthy as, or maybe even more unhealthy than total ignorance when it comes to fitness and health. And so I had to really realize I am dealing with the average person. And if I truly want to help them, I have to realize that I have to talk to them from their standpoint. One other thing, Stephen, that I want to go back to, we talked about Western medicine a little bit and looking at things through, a specific lens. Here's a mistake that I want to address that I think a lot of us make when we are so sold on the Western medicine approach or the scientific approach, which, by the way, extremely transformative, extremely valuable, one of the most valuable methods of health and approaching how to understand the human body that we've ever seen. Not the only one, but definitely one of the most effective. But here's the problem with thinking that is the only answer, okay? Oftentimes, this is what I get from the science-based crowd. Anecdote is not evidence. Okay, that's true. Anecdote is not evidence, right? The story from my friend who said they followed this diet and did this workout and they said it changed their life and made them healthy, probably less valuable, or I should take it with a grain of salt when compared to a double-blind, placebo-controlled, 12-week study, okay? Sure, understood. But a lot of anecdote that spans decades or 100 or thousands of years, that's the best evidence in my opinion, or at least evidence you should consider along the same lines of a placebo-controlled, double-blind study. You know, when Chinese medicine says, this herb helps with fertility, and they've been saying it for 1,000 years, and there are no studies that continue that at the moment support it, I'm going to still take it pretty damn seriously. It's stood the test of time, okay? And a lot of anecdote tells you something. In fact, there are many, every single day there are drugs that passed the most rigorous regulatory agencies in the world, the FDA and the drug process. You know, to get a drug from conception to legalization in America costs something like $500 million to $1 billion. That's how extensive the regulatory testing process. There's phases and animal testing and human testing, all stuff. And they still screw up all the time. We still pull drugs off the market all the time that passed all that. And then, oh my God, we just discovered that this drug causes heart problems. And so now we got to pull it off the market, okay? When you have stuff that's been said and communicated, maybe through a different lens, but it's been done for a long time, I think we should pay attention. I'll give you one other example, okay? 20 years ago, in the fitness and health, and even maybe the wellness space, maybe not the whole wellness space, but some of the wellness, but definitely in the fitness space, if you talked about any health benefits related to fasting, you would be laughed out of the room. You would be totally laughed at, scoffed at. Get out of here, you're an idiot. You need to eat every day. In fact, you need to eat every few hours. You're going to put your body in starvation mode. It's going to promote fat storage. There's no health benefits to not eating for 24 or, God forbid, 48 hours. You're crazy, okay? But at that point, 20 years ago, when everybody said you would be an idiot, which now it's common knowledge that there are some health benefits, both physiological and definitely maybe mental, psychological benefits to fasting for some people. Not everybody, but for some people. That's considered now like common knowledge. 15, 20 years ago, you were called crazy. You were called crazy. But guess what? Spiritual practices that are thousands of years old, all of them have fasting in their practice. The roots of medicine, which we could take all the way back, of modern medicine, take all the way back to maybe the Greek philosophers and how they approached medicine, do no harm or whatever. All these things we say now in modern medicine came from those roots, right? They used fasting. They saw benefits to fasting. They treated epilepsy. They didn't know it was epilepsy, but they treated epilepsy with fasting. Had no idea what was going on, but they saw that it worked. Christianity, fasting is a part of it. Judaism, fasting is a part of it. Islam, fasting still a part of it. Buddhism, Confucianism, all major spiritual practices had fasting in them. We ignored all of it because Western medicine 20 years ago had yet to show there were any benefits to fasting, so we said it was crazy. So I think we do ourselves a tremendous disservice by putting ourselves in a camp and marrying that camp and not being open to other things. And I can really even bring it to very specifically to fitness. You know, when we started the podcast 5 years ago, Stephen, 5 years ago on the podcast, if I talked about the how yoga could help the bodybuilder build more muscle, and we would talk about this, we got messages and negative messages and people, you're an idiot, you have no idea what you're talking about, you know, and we made our case. We know that there's definitely some crossover benefits and improving your functional range of motion through a practice like yoga is going to improve the muscle building effects of your resistance training, not to mention reduce your risk of injury and all this other stuff. And I could go all day into the science of it, but definitely will help you build more muscle. We were called idiots and morons. And that was 5 years ago, you know, just in the fitness space, you know, kettlebell training. There was the kettlebell guys and girls, and there were the barbell guys and girls, you know. Oh, barbell squats, deadlifts. You know, when I managed gyms in the late 90s, early 2000, I would manage these 40, 50,000 square foot boxes. Okay, like, you know, you're talking about millions of dollars in monthly dues every month, packed gyms during prime time. I had 50, 60 people on staff, huge gyms, one squat rack, dust all over it. Nobody did squats. It was like, if you did a deadlift, you would get members would come up to you and tell you you're going to hurt your back, and they would report you to the staff. When I would deadlift 20 years ago or 15 years ago, as a trainer, I'd have people coming up to me telling me I was crazy. That was what it was. Deadlifts, that's for power lifters. Otherwise, you hurt your back. Don't do it. Not worth it. There's no benefit to it. Stick to the machines and your isolation exercise. That's what it was like, So, and we totally killed ourselves. Not only did we prevent ourselves from achieving whatever our specific goals were, but we completely blunted our own progress with all things fitness and health. So I think it's important to sit down and have it. If I sit down with somebody who's following a practice that's been around for 150 years and they're telling me, hey, you should try this, you should try Indian clubs. Okay. For example, Indian clubs are great for health. And, we've been practicing this for 150 years and the wrestlers in India did it. And it was a big deal. And, if my knowledge is all about bodybuilding, barbells and dumbbells, I may look at that and go, yeah, that's stupid. But what I should do is say, well, I wonder why it's lasted so long. Let's see what I can learn from that. A long time ago, thank God I did this, by the way. It was really my pursuit of knowledge that got through my hard head. I wanted to know more than I wanted to be right, which thankfully that was my view back then. It really helped. At the time, most of my information was communicated through muscle building magazines, and internet was in its infancy, and you could buy books, and I'd read Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, and this is where I learned everything. And there was this one point where I started to realize, this happened kind of early, I'm sure this happened to you too, where you finally realize that the bodybuilders that you thought are so cool are not only genetic freaks, like they just have genetics that don't exist in most people. It's like 7 foot tall people. Like most people are never going to be 7 feet tall. Not only that, but they take just tons of drugs to look the way they do. And I remember when I realized that, I was like, oh, okay, maybe what they're communicating is not right for me. So then I thought to myself, you know what I should do? I should look way back to the muscle building information that was communicated way back before people even used steroids, before supplements even existed. How did those guys work out? What did they do? What were they saying? I wonder if it's different. Sure enough, it was very different. I bought, Eugene Sandow's strength training. I looked at how Steve Reeves and John Grimmick worked out, and how those guys all trained back in the day, strongmen, and I found similarities in their training, but it looked very different from what I had read in the, flex and muscle and fitness and all that stuff. And I said, you know what? Let me give it a try. What's the worst that could happen? That's what worked for them. They didn't take steroids. They didn't even take creatine or protein powder. This was way back before that stuff. Let's see what happens. Blew my mind. I saw strength gains and mobility gains and totally changed everything. And that was kind of the first peek into that was like the first time I looked behind the curtain at the Wizard of Oz. You know what I mean? I looked behind and said, oh, there's a guy behind here operating everything. And it helped quite a bit. And we really do a disservice to ourselves in the space to stick so hard to one thing. And so that's what I, even to your listeners, there's a lot to learn from experts in different aspects of health and wellness. That doesn't mean that they're all totally valuable for you in equal ways, but pay attention. And also, if something is working for you now, consider this. You are always ever changing. So if you find something that seems to work with your lifestyle, your current health, the context of your life, that doesn't mean it's always going to work. And the reason why I say that is because you see a lot of people who maybe in the current context of their life, what's going on now and their current, physiological state, they find this diet, they find this workout, it really works well for them, but then it doesn't. And because they're so stubborn and stuck to that, they ignore their signal, the bodies of the signals of their body. They ignore what their body's telling them. This is when people come to me and say things like, yeah, I've been on keto for 3 years it really worked so well for me and it helped me lose weight, but I can't figure out now why my hair is falling out. And, I can't figure out why I'm not feeling good. What's happening? And I'm like, well, have you looked at the fact that you're following the same diet for 3 years and maybe we need to look at something a little different? And, well, no, this works so well for me. Not now. So let's be a little open-minded and see what's going on. Things always change. So your training and your nutrition and your approach to how you take care of yourself should probably also change.
Yeah, I mean, those are, all great points there. There was a lot of wisdom wrapped up into what you're doing right now. And the reason why I say that too is that when you look at your program right now, if you're in a good spot, much of what you're doing is probably on point, like you're probably on track. But just like you said, that does not mean that you can't say, oh, kettlebells, they started to become more popular early 2000s. Oh, stability ball or the mace. It's like we take whatever we're doing right now and then we totally stop it and then do only kettlebell workouts.
Yeah.
Or only a mace is great, but you don't need to do 20 exercises in one program with a steel mace. It's like you can add that in to an already great program. So not only does it's dumb, you shouldn't be using that. It's, okay, maybe there's something I can add to my program that I'm already currently doing to make it even better instead of saying, oh, my program, it's worthless. Let me just switch over now to doing, every kettlebell exercise under the sun.
You know what?
Versus saying we're going to add it in.
I got a great example. So here's you're going to love this, I'm sure. You and I are around the same age. So it sounds like I'm talking about something else, but I got a good point here to make with this. So the martial arts space for a long time was very segmented. Okay. It was like your taekwondo or judo or karate or Kempo karate versus American Kempo or Kung Fu or whatever. Which style was best? Which martial art was best? And I was a huge martial arts fan as a kid, huge Bruce Lee fan. Watched all the movies, thought it was so super cool. I did judo as a kid and always loved the asking the question, which martial art was most effective? Okay, well, mid 90s, this tournament, this crazy reality tournament comes on TV on pay-per-view. I'll never forget seeing the commercial for it. It was like, I'm a teenage boy and it was like my head exploded when I saw this. It was the Ultimate Fighting Championship. There are no rules. Which martial art is the most effective? Karate versus judo versus boxing versus wrestling. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing of all time. We finally get to figure out who has the best modality. Okay. So here we are 20 something years later. Okay. What do people who fight in the Ultimate Fighting Championship look like? They are well versed in everything. They do a little bit of everything and they're really good at all of it. In fact, if you're an expert in one and you don't know the other stuff, you are not going to do well in a tournament like that. So the answer was none of them are the best. All of them have some value. And that's just such a great analogy for how we should approach our health, how we take care of ourselves. Here's a big one, okay? And I love to talk about this. The root of why you're doing what you're doing is more important than what you're doing. Okay? If the root of why I am exercising and trying to change my nutrition is I'm disgusted with my body, I hate the way I look, I'm too fat, I'm too skinny, I don't look good. If that's the root, then the way you're going to approach exercise is through punishment. Oh, I ate that burrito yesterday, I need to sweat it out. It's through restriction. You're at a party and your friend says, hey, want a cookie? I can't have that. Or it's through rebellion. You know what? I stopped working out because I need to enjoy my life. Or, you know what? I stopped that diet because life's too short and I want to enjoy life. Okay? That sounds like a lot of people. It's restrict, it's binge, it's extreme exercise, or no exercise. If the root behind what you're doing is self-care, self-love, not I'm disgusting, I'm fat, I hate the way I look, but rather, you know what? My body right now is reflecting the fact that I haven't done a good job taking care of myself. And I deserve being taken care of. I need to be able to I need to take care of myself. That's it. Like I'm going to start treating myself well, and I'm going to start taking care of myself. Then exercise becomes appropriate. It becomes, I ate that burrito yesterday. I was probably stressed out. In fact, I know I was. Work was tough. I felt a little depressed. You know what I need to do in the gym today? I need to do some yoga and meditation. Or I need to do some light cardio, and I need to listen to some positive affirmations instead of beating the crap out of myself. It becomes with diet, you're at a party, and your friend says, here, have this cookie, and you say, you know what, I don't want that. Whoa, that's powerful. Not I can't, I don't want it. Okay? That results in forever success. That results in, look, who doesn't like to take care of themselves? You are not at war with your health and nutrition and fitness approach. Those are all ways that you're trying to take care of yourself. And what we just talked about, being open-minded to all these different modalities, it opens up. Because if the root is wrong, then I may view exercise as a which one's going to burn the most calories. Which one's going to beat me up the most? Which one's going to make me the most sore? Which one is the most effective to change my body in the shortest period of time? If my approach is from self-care, then I'm going to say, which form of exercise is going to take care of me the most right now, today?
So one of the reasons, too, that I think I learned this, and it sounds like you saw this as well, is I had some great mentors in the fitness space. I was studying Mark Verstegen. I would go every Wednesday to work with Coach Mike Boyle at Boston University.
Awesome.
And just basically from an internship. I didn't get paid. I just sat there, helped if he needed anything. But basically, I was just there to watch and learn. And one thing they continued to share with me was that every single workout is to get you to the next workout.
Yeah.
And it's very different than today, meaning if you're not lying down in a pool of sweat, having hit your PR, then the workout was basically a waste. And that mentality, though, leads to people with very little longevity in this fitness-based space. So when you're saying, oh, well, look at what anecdotally is working, I completely agree. And one thing, again, I learned from whether it was Juan Carlos way back in the day or Mark Verstegen or Coach Boyle, or I'm trying to think of some of the other people that I really learned from, is that they said what we're doing right now will be in the textbooks 10 to 20 years from now.
Yeah.
Is that before a study is even done, it has to be, well, because somebody wants it done. It's already being shown to work in the real world. But then it has to pass my next test. How long will this last? And so you can't stay on a carnivore diet indefinitely and be healthy, or keto diet indefinitely be healthy, especially as a woman, because we know clinically, again, without lab testing, it's going to show you, okay, this is what it does to your HPA axis. This is what it does to your thyroid. Here's what happens over time. Or it's good for this segment of the population for a period of time and not good for this segment of the population. So what you're talking about is also longevity in this actual endeavor, such as exercise. And no matter who you are, you need a form of exercise. And I also want to go back to, why should everyone include resistance exercise, since that's your specialty as well? Like one of your specialties and expertise is in resistance exercise, because it's the one thing that people don't want to do. Yeah. People will walk, people will even run, even though their form, like you said, I mean, I live in Maine during the summer, and I watch people 50, 60 years old, sometimes younger, and they're running, and their knees internally rotating, their left foot is supine, their right shoulder's dropped. And I just said, it's only a matter of time before this person's so injured, they're already injured now, but they're so injured that they can't continue to do this. And then what? Their health just dramatically begins to deteriorate, because this is the one thing that they're doing. So I'm actually, if you talk to me between the year of 1996 and 2006, and you were a client of mine and doing cardio, I would laugh at you. Yeah. Like literally, I'm just like, you're spending time that you could be weight training and doing resistance training. Because it was all about, I know that resistance can actually improve cardiovascular degree. What I didn't, I wasn't mature enough at that point to understand that you're using a whole different energy system. Yeah. That the aerobic system and oxygenation actually helps with the recovery. It actually helps with the mitochondria. It helps with so many different things that you can't get during anaerobic-based activity. So again, I began to realize, okay, there's a time and place for aerobic-based activity, not doing 1,000 repetitions of squats, right? Or 1,000 3-pound dumbbells. That's not aerobic, and that's not anything. You shouldn't be doing that ever. That's repetitive motion injury. And there's a time and place for walking, and it's not exercise, it's a human activity. But the longest lived people in the world, they walk 10,000 steps a day or so. But what people don't want to do is lift objects because it causes strain on the body. Yeah. And the thought of that is like, I'll do anything but that. So I want to hear from you why we should be doing it. Or maybe you say that not everybody needs to do it, but I would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes. Okay. So 2 things here. Here's the reason why, for the vast majority of people maybe listening to this podcast or watching this, running might be a bad idea. I want to address that first. The reason why that might be a bad idea is because we don't treat exercise like we're learning skills. We treat exercise as a means to an end, to sweat and get sore. So people don't go out and run and think to themselves, I want to learn how to run and get better at running. They think, I'm going to run until I get tired. And the reason why that's a problem is because although humans, from an evolutionary standpoint, we did evolve to do a few things pretty well: run for distance, throw for accuracy, make tools. I mean, we do those things very, very well, but that doesn't mean that we do them really well when we haven't practiced them for decades. You lose that skill. Whatever you don't practice, you lose. So then you're in your 30s and you decide, I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to go for a run. You haven't run consistently ever, and you just go, and your goal is to sweat. So you're not even worried about the skill of running. And so you end up hurting yourself and causing a lot of problems. So that's the issue. The issue is, if you want to run, it's a skill. It's going to take you time to learn. Treat it like practice. And just like anything else, if you're practicing a skill, you can't do it to fatigue, because the second you get fatigued, you lose all your form. You're just not going to have good form. So really the way people should be running, especially for the first probably year or two, is they perfect their technique and their form. They're running really well. Oh no, I'm getting tired. Form is breaking down. I'm going to stop. But nobody does it that way. They go and run until they get tired. Okay, so just wanted to touch upon that.
One thing we should add to that is that there's also an upper limit to running, meaning that the only way to get better at running is to run longer or run faster. And if you run faster, it eventually becomes anaerobic, and then you can't run longer. And then also, I just want to add this, because whenever we're talking about cardio, because I'm a believer in it now,
right,
and I've seen what it can do for cancer-based therapies and these types of things, but also what's popular right now, and I'm sure you've seen this and maybe had people on your show, is marathons, but that's not good enough. So ultra marathons, and that's not good enough, and 200-mile races. And what happens is when you run that much, because humans weren't meant to run that much. We're still on 2 legs. We don't have 4 legs. So what happens is the reactive oxygen species, basically oxidative stress, again, doesn't happen overnight. Over a period of months and years, begins to age you at a massive and rapid rate. Yep. And so what we think is good until it's not. And for sure, it's different for different people, but nobody's meant to run a marathon.
No.
In my opinion, but I'll listen to your thoughts.
Yeah, no, there's the right dose, and then there's too much. And we tend to have this, if some is good, more is better. Anything extreme is not good for longevity. Okay, so if you want to be extreme strength, extreme flexibility, extreme endurance, extreme entrepreneur, extreme whatever, you are going to lose general overall longevity and health in the pursuit of that extreme. So people need to understand that. So extreme power lifters and bodybuilders and marathon runners are not the healthiest people. They're just the best at that extreme endeavor. That's why you shouldn't look at athletes, for example, and say that's a picture of health. It's not. That's a picture of maximum performance for whatever that particular sport is. Okay, so let's get back to resistance training. You just heard me say in this podcast how all forms of exercise have some value. You need to look at all of them. But you also heard me say simultaneously that resistance training is probably the most important form of exercise, and everybody should be doing it. Now, the reason why I say that really is because we are in the context of modern life. The vast majority of people watching this podcast and listening to me talk live in a modern Western society. We are very sedentary, like I said earlier, very busy but sedentary. That means we don't have a lot of time to dedicate to exercise, or at least we don't perceive to have a lot of time to exercise. We're not moving much, and we got lots of food, lots of choices. around us. So how do we find what form of exercise can give me the most bang per time spent? Which form of exercise most directly combats our sedentary lifestyle? Because what are the results of being sedentary? You lose muscle very rapidly. Muscle is a tissue that is constantly adapting to your lifestyle. You're either building it or losing it. It doesn't really just stay. When you maintain, what you're really seeing is the balance between building and losing. In fact, the most muscular, strong person listening to this right now, put your arm in a cast for 4 days and then you'll lose muscle. And that's how fast it happens. Our body's always adapting. Muscle's always adapting. So we're sedentary. So we're constantly battling this muscle loss. We're constantly battling bone loss. That's a real reality now as we age. We're constantly fighting declining, youth promoting or anabolic hormones in men, testosterone, growth hormone, both in men and women. We're looking at imbalances with progesterone and estrogen. Virility and fertility is declining as a result. Speaking about men, for example, theoretically, we should be able to procreate till the day we die, but we're seeing declining sperm counts because of our lifestyle. So what form of exercise with minimum time can positively affect muscle, bone, hormones, and buffer the fact that we're probably going to eat more than we should, or, we're probably going to eat higher calories because we live in this world with lots of amazing food that's all around us. And as evidenced by the number one killer in Western societies, which is too much food and not too little food, which is what it was for most of human history. I mean, we totally flipped the script. We went from not enough food to now we're dying because we have too much. So in that context, okay, and I'm not saying resistance training is the only answer. I'm just saying in that context, by itself, if you had to pick one form of exercise that you could only dedicate 1 to 2 hours a week on, which one's going to give you the best result? It's going to be resistance training. Resistance training directly tells the body to build muscle. That's the loudest signal that it sends. Other forms of exercise, to a lesser degree, tell you to strengthen your body, but in some cases, they may actually even get you to lose muscle. Cardiovascular activity done to higher extremes. Your body, as it aims at becoming more efficient at cardio, because remember, your body's always adapting to its lifestyle, as it aims to become more efficient, reduces its caloric burn to become a more efficient, slow calorie burning machine with more endurance. You don't need strong, big muscles to have a lot of endurance. Plus, big muscles burn a lot of calories. Since you're burning a lot of calories with your cardio, let's become a Prius. Let's become a hybrid engine. And so you might end up losing muscle. Resistance training tells the body, build muscle, build strength. All right, metabolism. We got all this food around us. And so we need to buffer that a little bit. Resistance training burns more calories through the metabolism boosting process than any other form of exercise. Now, as a calorie burning form of exercise, if you compare it, time spent being done, like 30 minutes of resistance training versus 30 minutes of cardio, resistance training pales in comparison to cardio. You're going to burn more calories during cardio than you are doing resistance training. However, resistance training will result in a metabolism that's burning more calories all the time. So now maybe you were burning, 2,000 calories a day, just being alive, but now you're burning 2,400 calories a day just being alive because you've ramped up your body's calorie burning process. And it does this through a couple different ways. One, just the added muscle. You just got more muscle. More muscle takes more calories to support. But that's not it. It's actually not the only reason why that happens. Because if you do it on that basis, you find, okay, you gain 4 pounds of muscle. You're really only burning another, 100 calories, which still is a dent if you consider it long term. But it doesn't account for how I've seen so many clients burn 500 more calories a day just because they gained a few pounds of muscle. It's also because you're telling your body to not be as efficient with calories. Okay, you're also sending that signal, and we see a range here. In fact, I don't think there's many studies to support this. This is anecdote, but I've seen it time and time again. Just changing the signal that you send the body will get a person's body to just burn more calories. And just sending the signal to conserve calories, gets a person's body to become more efficient. For most of human history, an efficient body was beneficial. Today, not beneficial. You don't want a slow metabolism right now because you're probably going to eat a lot of food. You want a fast metabolism. It just buffers it more. Resistance training does that better than any other form of exercise. We talked about bone loss. Not only does resistance training send a signal to build muscle, it also sends a direct signal to build bone. Stronger muscles pull or anchor on bone, and that shear force strengthens bone more so than any other form of exercise. Cardiovascular exercise tends to be limited with how it strengthens bone. If I run, most of the bone building effects are going to be in my lower body. I'm not going to see a whole lot of it in my upper body. With resistance training, because I tend to train my entire body with different forms of exercise, you see this all the way around. We talked about hormone balance. So the most common thing we see in men is testosterone levels declining. No form of exercise will raise testosterone if applied appropriately in men than resistance training. There's no form of exercise. Growth hormone, phenomenal at balancing out and giving you youthful growth hormone levels. Now, why is that happening? Those are anabolic hormones. If I'm telling my body to build muscle, it now is going to produce hormones that help build more muscle. What about insulin? I didn't even mention insulin. Improving insulin sensitivity. Muscle does that. Muscle is a great tissue for giving you better insulin sensitivity. If I start to build muscle, my insulin levels, I'm going to be utilizing them a little bit more effectively than I would if I had less muscle. We talked about progesterone and estrogen in women. If applied appropriately, and here's what I love about resistance training. Resistance training, and this is in the context of hormones for women, it is extremely individualizable. It is very moldable. Resistance training done properly is applied very differently from person to person. I can train someone with resistance in a wheelchair. I can train a 15-year-old. I can train an 80-year-old. There are a number of there's almost an infinite number of exercises and different ways to apply them. And done properly, I can individualize that routine. So I could take the woman with a progesterone estrogen balance that's off, and I can train her with the right intensity, send the right signal, balance those out. Other forms of exercise tend to be much more in a rigid box. Running looks like running. Yoga looks like yoga. Pilates looks like Pilates. Swimming looks like swimming. Resistance training, yes, you're using resistance, but it's super moldable to people. So when it comes to hormone balance, as a trainer, when I would work with functional medicine doctors, the best results I ever got was with appropriately applying resistance training, to my clients. So those are the reasons why resistance training needs to be, if you're a doctor and you have a patient, your 45-year-old, whatever, or 50-year-old patient comes to you, and you're looking at their blood and you're seeing their lipid levels are off and blood pressure's a little bit sketchy, and your fasting, glucose is borderline, and that they're probably don't move much, they're probably busy. You're going to need to give them something to do that's going to help them, but it's not going to take much time, both because the time problem and also because they're not exercising now. Telling someone to do 30 minutes of activity every single day, not realistic. So, okay, I need to communicate to this person that they got to do, maybe 2 30-minute sessions a week or 2 60-minute sessions a week. What can I tell them to do? Resistance training. Start there. And by the way, resistance training isn't just with barbells and dumbbells. It's done with body weight. It's done with bands. You can train and modify any exercise to fit anybody. And then going back to what I said about running, here's the way you need to treat resistance training. Treat it as skill development. When you go into your workout, and this is the way we write our programs, Stephen, when you go into your workout, and let's say you're going to work out your legs today. When I'm going to the gym, I'm going to work out my legs. Stop thinking to yourself, I got to get my legs tired and sore. Start thinking to yourself, I'm going to pick these 3 leg exercises and I'm going to perfect them and get really good at them. And that's it. Practice resistance training. And if you do that, not only will you get better results now, you'll get much better results later on.
Yeah, I want to talk to you in a minute more about how your programs are different specifically and what you're doing to walk people up these levels. But one thing that I'll share is that when you think about or hear Sal talk about putting on muscle, you have to understand is that muscle is like a gift. It's not as easy to put on as you would think. So if you think that you're going to bulk up, you're going to end up with 17-inch arms, or especially like a lot of women, there's this perpetuated myth that you're going to bulk up if you start to do resistance training. It's honestly nothing to be further from the truth. You're actually going to look leaner, even at the same weight, because you're going to start to work on actually burning body fat, as you just said, over a period of some of the best statistics I've ever seen is one workout can last 36 hours.
Yes.
Meaning the benefits from that resistance training workout, you don't have to do it every day. I tell people all the time, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, fun workout on the weekend. Or Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, come up with something that allows you to do every other day to keep that metabolism stoked. And sure, you might put on some muscle, but if you look at a good model of what 5 pounds of muscle looks like versus 5 pounds of body fat, you'd be shocked. 5 pounds of muscle is very dense and it's spread over your entire body. So when you're doing full body training workouts or you're doing specific splits that maybe you'll talk about, you're not putting a pound or two in one specific area, and you'd be lucky if you put on a pound or two in a month. And that's only going to happen to people that are really untrained or haven't been trained for a while. Most people, that muscle maturity sets in, and now you're getting the accumulated benefits of sticking with your resistance program. And
yeah, you know what?
The other thing,
if I can tell one story just to back you up, Stephen, and before I do, I want to get an episode for you if people want to learn more about the myths around resistance training, especially for women. Doug, if you don't mind looking that up for me, one of our episodes on the fitness myths for women, I'd like to tell them which one it is so your audience can listen if they're really interested in that. But I'll touch on that just a little bit. So when I used to manage gyms, that was always a big issue. Women would come in, I'd talk to them about resistance training, and they'd be like, oh no, I don't want to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And what you said is totally true. First of all, it's not going to happen. You could train for 15 years trying to look like a bodybuilder, and it's not going to happen. There's a very, very small percentage of the population that can build muscle like that, and many of them also take testosterone, male hormones, to accomplish that. Not going to happen for you. But what I used to do for when they would say this to me, so I had a gym, I had lots of trainers, and I'd have female trainers that, lifted weights and did all that stuff. And there was one in particular that I used to do this with. So I'd be sitting with a potential member, and they'd be telling me how they don't want to lift weights. And we'd talk about this, and I'd say, hold on one second. I'd get on the intercom, and I would page my trainer, attention staff, so-and-so, please come to Sal's office. So in would walk in my 5'1" fit female trainer, okay? Great curves, great, arms and delts, and just looked excellent, very lean. And she'd walk in, and I would tell my potential member, I'd say, okay, this is so-and-so. She lifts weights 5 days a week like a bodybuilder. How much do you think she weighs? 5'1". How much do you think she weighs? And they'd look at her and they'd go, 100 pounds, 105 pounds. It was always around between 95 and 105 pounds. And then we would all walk over to the scale. She would step on the scale, and it was 135 or 140 pounds. So she was 30 pounds heavier than they could possibly guess. And that's because muscle is dense. It gives you shape. It gives you curve. Her waist was small. She was lean. She had all the areas that women typically want to work on, butt, hamstrings, the whole deal. But it would blow their mind. They couldn't understand. You could do this with men too. You could look at a 6 foot, tall, 200-pound man with muscle versus one without muscle, and it looks like doesn't make any sense just from a visual perspective. But resistance training, women, when I would get female clients and would get them bought in on resistance training, they would get sold on how tight their body felt, how much more food they could eat now and burn more calories, how balanced the hormones felt, because sending that muscle building signal made them feel the way that they thought they would feel doing all those aerobic step classes or whatever they thought would help them out. So it's 100% resistance training isn't. And by the way, if you are one of those, the 1 in a million that does build muscle like crazy, you're still not going to work out today and wake up tomorrow looking like a bodybuilder. It's not going to happen. Here's what'll happen. You'll get to the point where you'll look in the mirror and say, you know what? This is about as far as I want to go. I think I'd like to maintain, in which case you change your workout and then you just maintain your body. So huge myth, total baloney. The fitness industry perpetuated that to attract women into the gym. Here's a good example of that. The word toned is a made-up word the fitness industry invented to attract women because they were afraid of building, because at that time, the only people that built were bodybuilders. So they created this word, toned. Muscles don't tone. They build or they shrink. And if you build a little bit, they just feel more tight. And that's the word tone. So just an example of how you've been lied to a little bit. Oh, it's episode 1077, The 7 Deadly Fitness Lies Sold to Women. So if you want to learn more about that, check out that episode. We go deep into it.
And we'll link that up as well for sure. And I've actually worked with that 1 in a million, and I can tell you it is 1 in a million females that started to put on more muscle without any performance-enhancing drugs, anything like that. And it was not difficult to just say, okay, we're dialing back the volume, we're dialing back specific things to find the program that works perfect for you. She's happy because it's actually way easier to go backwards than it is to keep moving forward, with most people. So, that's a great thing. And I'll share one more thing because I do want to hear about your programs. And again, we could easily talk for 2 more hours. But one big thing is that now more than ever, people are more into fasting. They're more into restrictive eating. They're more into certain forms they're more catabolic. And we talk about this in the show, so my community knows what catabolic means. But you have to understand is that everything in life is about balance. It's about achieving equilibrium. So if you're doing cardio, if you're doing regular walking, if you're getting less than your 7 to 9 hours of sleep because you're working, if you're a busy individual, you're doing 16 hours of fasting, or maybe you're doing 24, and then every couple months, maybe you do 2-3 days, you're doing nothing that's anabolic. So if you are not doing resistance training, you are stripping your body of your metabolism. That's the way that is. And once you strip your body of the metabolism and you tell your body that you're in a state of entropy, and if you're in a state of catabolism, plan on the hair getting thinner and falling out. Plan on your libido completely going away, your endurance going down, your ambition drive going down. Now, here's the great thing. You feel great in the beginning when doing all of these things because you're running on adrenaline, you're running on norepinephrine and dopamine. Eventually, that starts to slide. And it is resistance training that helps with that balance. So resistance training is an anabolic exercise, the only one that I know of. I don't know cardio to be anabolic, and I don't know walking to be anabolic. Now, walking's great. Actually, it helps with growth hormone, a few other things, because it turns on the parasympathetic. So think of walking as more recovery than an actual exercise or workout. But if you're not doing resistance training twice a week, after the age of 27, you are losing about 5 pounds per decade as a female, and not too much less for a male. That adds up over time. Doing resistance training tells your body to stay young, to keep the mitochondria in the cells alive. And again, everything you said is completely 100% on. But I want to say now more than ever, if you're into the whole fasting and lower carb and this and that, those are all catabolic. They work. Even a plant-based diet, it's more catabolic. Again, not saying it's bad. I'm a proponent of a plant-based diet. More catabolic. Milk, cheese, eggs, those are anabolic. There's a reason why bodybuilders did those things. You don't need to do them, but what you want to do is you always want to find balance. Doing 2 to 3 days a week of resistance training creates that balance. And so now I'd love to hear about the programs that you put together, the MAPS programs. What does MAPS stand for, and why did you come up with this?
Sure. So MAPS stands for Muscular Adaptation Programming System. And the reason why I named it that is because resistance training is really, if you boil it all down, it's sending a signal to your body to adapt in a particular way. Now, you're absolutely right about resistance training being the anabolic form of exercise, but I want to add this part. Adding it to your catabolic lifestyle isn't going to necessarily mean you're going to reap the benefits of this anabolic form of exercise if you're already doing too much. Oftentimes, when people are too deep into that state, adding any form of exercise becomes catabolic, even resistance training. So what you might want to do is replace some forms of exercise with resistance training. So if you're doing 5 days a week of cardio, you're fasting, you're doing all that stuff you said, and then you want to add 2 days a week of resistance training, you're going to go further catabolic. What you might want to do is cut down your cardio, maybe take 3 or 4 days a week off of that, add 2 days a week of resistance training, and then allow your body to go in that state. And then one more thing to touch on fasting, and then I'll get into the programs. Here's why I don't advocate fasting for weight loss. I think fasting for weight loss is a terrible way to approach fasting. We used to call that starving yourself back in the day. And all you're doing is creating a negative relationship with food. You're just creating this restrict binge mentality. in my opinion, the only people that benefit from fasting are the ones that do it either for spiritual purposes, detachment purposes. I need to detach from certain things because I have a negative relationship with food. I need to eat. And so I want to kind of detach and find myself a little bit through it. I said spiritual, and people who already have a good relationship with food. They're mentally healthy with it. And now they're fasting for some of the health benefits. But the average person just wants to lose weight. Oh, I heard fasting is a great way to lose weight. Don't do it. We used to call it starving yourself. It's going to lead to that restrict binge food relationship, which means you're going to fail in the long term.
Let's clarify that just for 1 second, because I know what you're talking about, but you're talking about longer term fasting. You're not talking about 12 hours overnight from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Or are you? Do you believe that you should eat right up until bedtime? I just want you to clarify.
Yeah. So you got it. So I look at the whole thing, right, balance wise. If I have somebody, now I know physiologically speaking, you want to not eat at least a couple hours before bed, or if not longer. We know that from a physiological standpoint, 100% true. But if you're dealing with someone with a terrible relationship to food, who has been for the last 10 years going through this restrict binge process of dieting where they go on a super calorie, restricted diet, and then they go way off and gain a ton of weight back, and then they go back on the diet, then they go off the diet. I'm going to treat that first and say, okay, we need to stop being afraid of food. So we're going to eat some maybe smaller meals throughout the day. We're going to develop a better relationship to food. Once we can establish that, then we're going to start to look at the physiological most effective ways of eating. But first, I need to look at the mental aspect of it, because if I don't fix that, or at least help them fix that with themselves, nothing else is going to work, and we're going to end on this kind of yo-yo process. So it really does depend who I'm talking to. But from a physiological standpoint, yes, you're 100% correct and on point. I mean, to more extreme, I could say swimming in a cold lake at 5 a.m. physiologically is better for you than, going for a 30-minute walk after lunch. But if I know that you're probably never going to do the swim in the lake, and that's going to make you hate exercise so much you never want to do it again, I'm not going to recommend it. So, and that's just my training experience working with clients.
Yeah, and I would say that there's levels to that, right?
Yes.
So I agree. 12 hours, good for some people, maybe 10 to 11 for someone that's hypoglycemic, but you're helping them through that, and maybe 16 for certain individuals if that fast starts earlier in the night. And just like you said, first thing morning exercise, great for specific individuals, probably not for those people that are higher levels of norepinephrine. They're already lean, they're already sympathetic nervous system dominant. So I agree. I mean, you have to approach this as an individual. And I think that's where we've been talking about this whole time is self-awareness comes into it.
Yes.
It's like, what do you need right now? And as an individual, you always need to work on the mental part first.
Totally.
And all of us do. I mean, I need to as well. So it's like, first of all, just let's go back to this. Why are you choosing to do what you're doing right now? And then that answers a lot of that question. So I'm choosing to lose weight. Okay, that's fine. But what's the deeper reason that you want to lose weight? What's the deeper reason that you want to change your body? And most likely you'll find, well, there's something that you feel is missing, right? And so then it goes back to, if this can then trigger that idea of don't punish yourself to get there. It's not about punishment and rewards. That's not how it should be. Alfie Kohn wrote a great book on that, Punished by Rewards for Children. Well, we're basically big kids.
Oh, yeah.
So what we need to do is we need to create appropriate programs where you're not competing with anyone. You're simply making you a better version of you. And I know that's what you do with your MAPS program. So I want to hear how you individualize that, pull it out for people.
Yes, 100%. That's the approach. And you have to look at it that way. I mean, you talked about the people who are always catabolic. I call those people cortisol because they tell me, but I'll tell them you should probably, let's cut back on your high intensity, kickboxing class because you're too far in that direction. And they'll say, but you know what? When I do it, I feel so good. And it's like, well, yeah, your body's so desensitized to cortisol that squishing out more cortisol is going to make you feel more normal. And you're drinking caffeine all day long. So you become a cortisol. You probably find yourself late to meetings all the time too, and don't realize that you're psychologically doing that to yourself because you need the cortisol, and you see their eyes light up like, oh yeah, that's true. I am in that state. But okay, to the workouts. So we have lots of different workout programs, each one of them designed for a particular avatar. And the goal really is to get that person to get to their particular goal in the best way possible. Our resistance training programs tend to focus on the most effective exercises. What are the exercises that are going to give me the most bang for my buck? A lot of these exercises are like, barbell squats, deadlifts, overhead presses, rotational exercises, split stance exercises like lunges. Those exercises just give you more than lots of other exercises combined. They also require a lot of skill. So I know that if I program them, a person's going to practice these exercises and they're going to continue to reap benefits from them because you got to slowly get better at doing them. A barbell squat's very complex, especially when you compare it to like a leg extension or even a leg press. It's going to require more practice, more mobility. It's also a fundamental human movement. We also don't tend to promote body part split type routines too often. Now, we do have a split routine, which is appropriate for a small subset of the population. But for the vast majority of people, you're better off training your whole body, frequently than you are splitting up your body into body parts and doing all the volume for that body part on one day. So to clarify, you're better off, for example, training your legs maybe for 5 sets of leg exercises Monday, Wednesday, Friday than you are versus doing 15 sets on Monday. So same total volume, 15 sets. It's all 15 sets, same amount of volume, but it's better to do 5 sets 3 days a week than it is to do 15 sets and hammer your legs on one day. It builds more muscle. It gets you stronger. Your body responds better. You tend to do the most effective exercises more often because you're more fresh. You're not so fatigued. And you get better central nervous system adaptation because you're practicing more often. This is very important. Practicing a little every day is going to get you better results than practicing a lot less frequently. So a lot of our programs kind of follow that. So what you'll see in the routine is typically a 2 or 3 day a week full body routine. And then in the programs, we tend to throw in frequency builders, which allow you to add more if time permits and if you want. In one program, they're called trigger sessions. These are 10, 15 minute, maybe even less, 5 to 10 minute band exercises that you do maybe 2 or 3 days a week on your off days, just to send a low level signal to the muscles that reminds them you want them to stay anabolic, you want to build a little bit. It also feels good, facilitates recovery, it improves your daily activity. In other programs, we have what are called mobility sessions, where you might do your 2 or 3 day a week resistance training routine, but on the days off, time permitting, and if it's something you want to do, you can do a 30-minute session on improving your mobility, which is achieving greater ranges of motion you have control over, which is just going to make everything a lot easier. So it's different than flexibility. It's control. You were going to say something?
Well, I wanted to ask, how long do these programs last for? And are you able to choose ones that are, especially right now, pandemic state, can we do these at home?
Yes. All of our programs now include a mod that allows you to follow all of them if you just have dumbbells. We also have programs. We have one called MAPS Anywhere, which is designed without equipment. All you need are resistance bands and maybe a broomstick, and that's it. And you could do the whole routine on your own. So all of them are modifiable, and the mod is included in the program. But if you have a basic home gym setup, which includes barbell, dumbbells, and a bench, then you can follow pretty much any of our programs and be totally fine.
Excellent. I wanted to ask how long they actually last for too, and then do you help people transition to the next program of what they should choose?
Yes. So the programs are typically around anywhere between 10 to 14 weeks long. We talk a lot about which programs are appropriate to start with, depending on your goals and your current fitness level. If you're just getting started into resistance training, MAPS Starter is a phenomenal program, physio ball, dumbbell-based workout. Once you move from there, MAPS Anabolic, starting with the pre-phase section, and then move from there, MAPS Performance. So we do outline a lot of this. And ideally, the way that we wrote the programs was to follow one after another. So you have a structure of how I'm going to train my body over the course of, the next year and a half, and then I can cycle back through it. But here's what we really advocate for. Follow the programs as they're laid out, learn your body, and then once you go through them again, modify them based off how you feel and what works best for you. The best coach and the best trainer that exists is you. Your own body, your own signals, and how you feel. You got to learn how to read all that. You got to become aware of those signals and understand how to interpret them. But once you could do that, even I, with as much experience as I have, will not be able to train you as well as you can train yourself with those things. And so we recommend people follow the programs as they're laid out, ask us questions. We're very responsive on social media. Once you've gone through them, go back through them and modify based on your own individual body. Really, it's about developing a good relationship with exercise, understanding how to train yourself. And that's really the only way to do this long-term.
Excellent. And I want to ask you one more question, because I love asking everybody in their particular field who's an expert where they believe that their industry is moving. So the fitness industry has changed a lot. I still keep up with it. I love looking at, okay, this is what's going on globally. This is what the American College of Sports Medicine survey said this year. But also people that are in it. You're in it every single day. You're working with people every day around the world. So we know what it looked like in the 90s. We know what it looked like early 2000s. Okay, it's 2020. Where are we headed into the next decade? What do you think?
Okay, so when we started the podcast about 5 years ago, the trend that we saw or predicted or tried to encourage was the melding of the fitness and wellness space. At that time, they were very separate, okay? You're already starting to see that happen. Hardcore muscle building supplements now are flavored with stevia instead of aspartame, for example. And the bottles now start to look a little different. Instead of everything looking like it's a science project and this is the most advanced chemicals known to man to build muscle, it's starting to say things like natural, healthy, and build muscle type of stuff. So we're starting to see that meld, and I just foresee that happening even more. I'm starting to see the lines get blurred to where fitness, wellness, it's going to all kind of mean the same thing, and it should. That's exactly where the answers are. It's in all of those things combined. So I see that happening even more and more. Now I'm going to make a prediction, and I'm starting to see a little bit of it. We're going to see much more of this later on. One of the things I love about the health space is the good people in the health space, I should say, are constantly seeking to improve. Health and fitness is a pursuit of self-growth, 100%. In fact, it's one of the best ways to get started on the pursuit of self-growth because it's unassuming. You usually don't go into it thinking you're going to improve your total life, but then you learn lots of lessons like discipline, struggle, enjoy the journey, get comfortable with my body, failure's okay, learn from, and all that stuff. You learn all those lessons through health. So because the health space is evolving constantly, we are now starting to see people, and on my side, start to appreciate the entire sphere of health. It used to be, fitness and calories and macros, and now it's starting to include wellness, which includes things like sleep and meditation, and how you take care of yourself and your relationships with people. That's starting to peak in. And here's the next one, the spiritual aspect. Spiritual health is a very important part of the sphere of health, and that's very broad. It's like me saying fitness, which encompasses 1,000,001 different modalities of fitness. When I say spiritual health, I'm not talking about a particular religion or practice. I'm talking about the all of it. But you're starting to see that start to come in to fitness, and they're starting to identify that this is an important part of health. This is what generation after generation after generation for thousands of years people have valued because there is lots of health value in this. And you're going to start to see it bleed over into the fitness space. And it's because it's important. Spiritual practices bring you a different value that nutrition, wellness, and fitness just don't necessarily provide as well. And so that's my prediction. I think you're going to start to see more of that start to come into fitness, and I'm excited for it. But be patient. There's going to be growing pains. You're going to hear a lot of weird stuff. you're going to hear a lot of stuff that sounds kind of, like what's going on. Just like when, the fitness space started adopting, certain other modalities. At first, it sounded like a lot of bickering, fighting, and we don't know what's going on. But I think that's what's going to happen.
And I do hope that those predictions come true. I mean, those would be amazing in the next evolution of the space. It's also why, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, is that being a personal trainer is one of the best, if not the best job in the world. Because when you ascend as a personal trainer and you move beyond the meathead stage, which I was certainly at, I was probably stuck in it for way too long, you seem to have transcended it quickly, which is great, is that there's no end to it. You can't, once you're a personal trainer, you look at it differently if you do begin to move up, because you're not training just in fitness. Sure, you learned about fitness, but now you're learning about nutrition, and then anti-inflammatory based nutrition, and the spiritual aspect and the mental health aspect that we talked about so many times. So your potential for growth is enormous, and you get to be introduced to some of the most amazing people in the world through your clients, and you learn through those clients, you learn through your colleagues. So I'm a huge advocate. If anybody's looking for a career change, if anybody's looking for a second career or a first career, to get into personal training and then maybe become an integrative health practitioner becomes another part to it. But there's just no stopping your leveling up and your ability to move up in the industry. So go ahead. You had another word to say to that?
Yeah. Here's what personal training, well, first of all, if you want to become a trainer, you better love people, because otherwise it's going to be a very, very difficult job. A lot of people not listening to what you tell them to do, and a lot of people struggling, and you got to really love people to do the job. But if you love people and you love fitness, there is no better job to do. And you're 100% right, with the growth that you end up getting from doing that. But one thing you learn as a trainer, and this is, a lot of people in the podcasting space ask us all the time, how did your podcast become so successful? We went from nobodies to the top podcast in the fitness space in the world with zero media experience. None of us were on camera. None of us have ever been on radio. If you listen to those early episodes, please don't. But if you do, we were terrible. We didn't know, any of that. But why did we grow the way we did? Here's why. Personal training, when you do it long enough, teaches you how to communicate extremely effectively. You through just trial and error, you figure out ways of communicating to your clients that gets them to kind of make changes and understand what you're trying to say. You have to learn how to sell your ideas, because you're doing it constantly when you're training your clients. And so when we got on the podcast, aside from our terrible media, approach and lack of experience, when we would talk about fitness, what you heard was 20 years of trial and error on how to communicate fitness in an effective way, how to say what we say in a way that gets people to go, oh, that makes perfect sense. Like I said earlier about, chasing health and you'll get aesthetics, chasing aesthetics, you'll not get aesthetic, you'll not get health, which will then take away from your aesthetics. When I say that to somebody who all they want to do is look good, it gets through to them, because now they're like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not going to look good if I just chase my looks. Maybe I do need to pay attention to health. I learned that through years of talking to clients about getting healthy and not getting through to any of them. Like, okay, how can I sell this idea better? And that's really, that's one of the main skills you learn from personal training. And I bet that's probably why you can communicate so well, is because you did training for so long. Like, you got to learn that, right?
It's a big skill. I learned that through trial and error, not even really thinking about it, is that I would cue clients, like these clients this way, and they would get it. And then I would say the same things to these clients. I was like, oh, this is the template. This is the formula. And they just either weren't listening or they didn't get it. I'd have to cue them differently. So it is. And I think that's why, I got into personalized medicine, is that it has to be personalized on the individual, not only from the protocol that you give them, but actually the way that you speak to them. Mm-hmm. And so I always a pleasure. We need to connect more often.
Yeah,
I love hearing your viewpoints and all the different wisdom that you've accumulated over the past 20 plus years. Where can people hear more of this knowledge on a weekly basis on your podcast?
Oh, so we have 5 episodes a week. It's Mind Pump is the name of the podcast. We combine fitness, health, entertainment, and humor. The goal is to make listening to our podcast informative, but also enjoyable. So it's something you'll have a good time listening to. And then we have a YouTube channel if you want to see exercise demos and understand how to do a particular movement properly, taught by personal trainers, not fitness models. You can go to our YouTube page, which is Mind Pump TV. We have a lot of free content on our website, Mind Pump Media, that you can learn from. And then you can always find me on Instagram. I try to answer my DMs on a regular basis. You can find me, Mind Pump Sal. But really the best place to start, just listen to our podcast, find a podcast that speaks to you, and hear what we have to say. I think that's probably our best form of media for communicating our ideas.
Excellent. We will link everything up today on the show notes page, plus that extra episode that you spoke about. Sal, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. I appreciate you, and I'm sure all of our community appreciates all the knowledge you shared here today.
Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate it.